There are houses that breathe. Not in the way lungs expand with air, but in the way wood groans at night, in the way pipes knock like unseen fingers rapping against the walls. Some houses hold on to voices, the residue of laughter and arguments long past, pressed into their very foundations like old fingerprints in drying cement. My house was one of them. When I first moved in, it seemed normal, ordinary, even. A two-story home in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood on the outskirts of Portland. The kind of place where people took pride in their neatly trimmed lawns, where porch lights flickered on at sunset, and where kids rode their bikes down sidewalks without a care. Safe. Predictable. But predictability is a mask. And some masks slip. It started with whispers. Not voices. Whispers. Low, dry, and distant, like wind sifting through brittle leaves. I would hear them late at night. Just at the edge of sleep, brushing against the silence. At first, I thought it was the house settling, or maybe even my own imagination. But soon, the whispers became clearer. And they knew my name. I bought the house from an old couple, the Turners. They had lived there for over 50 years, raising their children within its walls. When I met them, Mrs. Turner had the frail, paper-thin skin of someone who had outlived too many people. Her husband sat quietly beside her, his eyes milky with age, staring at something only he could see. "It's a good house, Mrs. Turner told me as I signed the final paperwork. She hesitated for just a second before adding, "Just, don't ignore it." I had no idea what she meant. At first, everything was fine. I settled in. Unpacked, got used to the creaks and murmurs of an older home. But on the fifth night, I woke up at 3:12 a.m. to a sound just outside my bedroom door, a soft, rhythmic tapping. Tap. 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 I held my breath, listening. The sound continued, deliberate, steady. I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight, heart hammering against my ribs as I aimed the beam at the door. Nothing. The hallway was empty. I got up and checked every room. The windows were locked. The doors were bolted. No sign of forced entry. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there. Watching. And then came the whisper. "You're listening now." I spun around, phone light trembling in my hand. The voice had been right behind me, but there was no one there. Just my own reflection staring back at me in the darkened window. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. By the second week, the whispers weren't just at night. They followed me. While I made coffee. While I showered. While I sat on the couch, trying to pretend my life wasn't unraveling thread by thread. I tried to record them. Played back hours of audio. Nothing. But I could hear them. And they were getting louder. One night, I finally pinpointed the source, the smallest bedroom at the end of the hall. It had been empty since I moved in. Nothing but a few unopened boxes stacked against the walls. I rarely went inside. But now, standing in the doorway, I felt it. The silence inside that room was different. Heavy. Expectant. I stepped in, and the whispers stopped. Not faded. Not lessened. Stopped. As if the house was holding its breath. Then, from the farthest corner, where the shadows thickened unnaturally against the pale wallpaper, something moved. Not a person. Not an animal. Just, the shape of something shifting, unfurling from the darkness. And then it spoke. "You brought me back." I stood frozen in that tiny, suffocating room, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The words still echoed in my head. "You brought me back." The voice was neither male nor female. It was dry, rasping, as if the words had been scraped from the throat of something that hadn't spoken in years. I wanted to run. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to turn, to bolt down the hallway and never look back. but I couldn't move. My feet felt rooted to the floor. As if the room itself had tightened its grip around me. The shadows in the corner shifted again. Something was there. I forced myself to step back, my heel knocking against the doorframe. The sound was deafening in the silence. As soon as I moved, the air changed, the temperature plummeted so fast my skin prickled with goosebumps. Then, the voice came again. "Why did you come here?" It wasn't just speaking. It was inside the room, filling it, pressing against my ears, curling around my spine. I staggered backward into the hallway, my hand fumbling for the light switch. I slammed it up, flooding the room with yellow light. Empty. The corner where the shadow had shifted was just that, a corner. For plain walls, a single window. My unpacked boxes stacked against the baseboard. But I wasn't stupid. I knew something had been there. And worse, I knew it was still watching. I tried to ignore it. That was my first mistake. I told myself it was stress, an overactive imagination, maybe even sleep deprivation. The house was old, and old houses made noises. I avoided the small bedroom, shut the door, and went on with my life. But the house wasn't done with me. The next night, I woke up again at 3:12 a.m., the exact same time as before. Only this time, it wasn't tapping at my door. It was breathing. Long, slow, deliberate breaths. Not mine. It came from the corner of my room, near the closet. A steady rise and fall, like someone standing there, filling their lungs, exhaling in the dark. I couldn't move. My body locked up, my mind screaming at me to run, to turn on the light, to do something. But all I could do was lie there, paralyzed in my bed, listening. The breathing grew louder. Closer. Then, the mattress shifted. The pressure of something unseen pressed against the edge of the bed, just inches from my legs. My skin crawled. My pulse hammering so hard I thought my ribs would crack. I reached out blindly, fumbling for my phone on the nightstand. My fingers closed around it, and I flicked on the flashlight. Nothing. The room was empty. But the whisper came again. "The house remembers you." I didn't sleep after that. By the following evening, my nerves were shot. I didn't want to be alone in that house. But I didn't know where else to go. I called my friend Mark, asked if he could come over for a few drinks. I didn't tell him what was happening. He'd think I was crazy. Mark arrived around 9 p.m. A six-pack in one hand, a bag of chips in the other. "Dude, you look like shit," he said as soon as he saw me. "Didn't sleep much," I muttered. Understatement of the year. We sat in the living room. Drank, talked about nothing. For the first time in days, I felt a little normal again. Until the whisper came back. Low. Distant. From down the hall. I stiffened. Mark kept talking, oblivious. He didn't hear it. But I did. A long, dry hiss of words. "He's not supposed to be here." My stomach twisted into knots. I forced a smile, pretended to listen to whatever Mark was saying. Then, the front door rattled. Not a knock. Not the wind. Rattled. Like something was trying to get in. Mark frowned. "Did you hear that?" I nodded slowly. The door shuttered again. The doorknob twisting as if someone, something, was testing it. Mark stood, brows furrowing. What the hell? The porch light flickered off. Then the kitchen light. Then the lamp beside me. One by one. Every light in the house went out. And in the darkness, something moved. Something inside. The house plunged into darkness. For a second, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick, suffocating. Broken only by the distant hum of the refrigerator. My pulse roared in my ears. Then Mark muttered, "Okay, what the hell was that?" A flicker of movement. A shadow, not outside, but inside the house. I barely had time to process it before the whisper came again, curling through the blackness like smoke. "You shouldn't have let him in." Mark spun toward me. "What did you say?" I didn't say anything. My voice was barely above a whisper. Then, a footstep. Not ours. It came from the hallway. Slow. Careful. Deliberate. Mark turned toward the sound. "Dude. Tell me that was the house settling." I didn't answer. Because I could see it. At the end of the hallway, just beyond the reach of the dim moonlight filtering through the window. Something stood there. It wasn't just a shadow. Shadows don't breathe. Shadows don't watch. And this one was watching. A shape, tall, thin, its form flickering at the edges like static on an old TV. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its gaze drilling into me, waiting. Then, it moved. Not like a person. Not like anything human. It twitched. 1 second, it was at the end of the hall. The next, closer. I didn't see it step forward. It just was. I grabbed Mark's arm, my fingers digging into his skin. "We need to go. Now." But Mark was still staring at the thing, his face pale. His breath shallow. "That's not real," he whispered. The thing took another not step. Closer. Mark made a strangled sound in his throat. He saw it now. We bolted for the front door. I yanked at the handle, locked. My fingers fumbled with the deadbolt, shaking so hard I could barely grip it. Mark was behind me, cursing under his breath, glancing back at the hallway. At the thing coming toward us. Then. A whisper in my ear. So close, I could feel the cold of it. "Let me in." The deadbolt twisted on its own. The door blew open. Mark and I stumbled out. Nearly falling off the porch as the night air hit us. The second we crossed the threshold, the feeling of pressure, of being watched, vanished. The house went silent. But not empty. I turned back. The doorway gaped like an open mouth. The house was still dark, still quiet, but I knew, it was still in there. Watching. Waiting. For me to come back inside. Mark drove us to his apartment across town. I barely spoke the whole way. My mind was spinning, replaying the thing in the hallway, the whispers, the way the door had unlocked itself. We sat in his kitchen, the overhead light too bright, too normal. Mark cracked open a beer, chugged half of it, then wiped his mouth. "You're gonna tell me what the hell that was," he said. I didn't know how to answer. How do you explain that your house is alive? That it remembers you? That something inside it doesn't just want to haunt you, it wants you back? I swallowed. I think it's been waiting for me. Mark frowned. What does that mean? I hesitated. I hadn't let myself think about it before, but now, away from the house. Pieces of a puzzle started clicking together. The whispers hadn't started until I moved in. It knew my name. It didn't want Mark there. Because the house wasn't haunted. It was claiming me. Mark shook his head. "Dude, you can't go back there." I exhaled slowly. I don't think I have a choice. I crashed on Mark's couch that night. Didn't sleep. Couldn't. Because at 3:12 a.m. something changed. It started with my phone. A notification lit up the screen. No message. No caller ID. Just a single word in white text. "Come home." My blood turned to ice. Then the lights flickered. Mark sat up from his bed in the other room. "Did you see that?" Before I could answer, the apartment door unlocked. Click. 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 Each lock disengaging one by one. The door creaked open. A gust of freezing air poured inside. And in the doorway, the thing stood there. It found me. Mark saw it this time, his sharp inhale, his eyes going wide with pure terror. I scrambled up, heart slamming against my ribs, my body screaming run. But I knew. I knew what it wanted. I had to go back. If I didn't, it would keep following me. Keep pulling me deeper into something I didn't understand. I could already feel it, something old, something patient, something that had been waiting far longer than I could imagine. So I did the only thing I could. I stepped toward the door. The thing tilted its head. Not a nod. Not approval. Recognition. Like it had been expecting me. And then. Darkness. I don't remember the drive back to the house. One moment, I was stepping toward the open door of Mark's apartment, staring into that cold, suffocating dark. The next, I was standing in my driveway. The house loomed before me, its windows black, empty. Waiting. The porch light, which had been broken since the first night, flickered on. A welcome. I swallowed hard and stepped forward. The air changed the second I crossed the threshold. It was subtle at first, an almost imperceptible shift, like stepping into deep water. The weight of the house settled around me, pressing in. The door swung shut behind me with a soft click. I wasn't alone. The whispers started immediately. Low. Muted. Curling through the walls, through the air, through me. But this time, I could understand them. They weren't random murmurs. They were names. Names layered over each other, dozens, hundreds, whispered by unseen mouths, repeating over and over, some overlapping. Some fading into others. I stepped forward, and the floor sighed beneath my weight. It was breathing me in. Then the whispers stopped. Silence. Except for one voice. A single word. Upstairs. I didn't want to go. Every nerve in my body screamed against it. But I moved anyway, like something unseen had its fingers hooked inside me, pulling me forward. The stairs groaned as I climbed. The hallway was wrong. It felt longer than before. Stretching. Distorting. And at the very end, the door. The door to the small bedroom. It was open. Inside. The shadows were thicker than they should have been, pooling unnaturally in the corners. And in the center of the room. A chair. A single wooden chair, placed precisely in the middle. Waiting for me. I didn't want to sit. But I did. And the moment I did, the walls exhaled. And everything changed. I wasn't in my house anymore. Not really. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, they blurred. Faded. As if reality itself was peeling away like old wallpaper. And in the dim, shifting space around me, I saw them. The others. Shapes. Figures. Some were only faint outlines. Flickering at the edges of my vision like static. Others were clearer, pale, hollow-eyed, faces twisted in expressions of silent despair. And they were all sitting in chairs. Just like mine. Row after row, stretching into the dark. I tried to move. I couldn't. Something held me there. Then, one of them turned toward me. Not their head. Not their body. Just their eyes. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't a haunting. This wasn't a ghost story. This was a place. A room outside of time. Outside of life. And I had taken my seat. A voice whispered from the dark. Not a human voice. Something older. Something woven into the walls, into the bones of this place. The house keeps what it is given. A pulse of something, pressure, energy. A force I couldn't name, rippled through the space. And suddenly, I could feel them. All the others. All the people who had sat in this chair before me. Trapped. Waiting. For what, I didn't know. I forced my mouth open. My voice came out hoarse, broken. What do you want? The answer came immediately. Not in words. In understanding. The house didn't want to haunt me. It didn't want to scare me. It wanted me to stay. And the second I realized that, I felt the weight pressing down, sinking into my skin, wrapping around my ribs like invisible hands. I was becoming part of it. Like the others. Like the names whispered in the walls. Like the ones who had never left. No. I refused. I fought against the pressure, against the pull. Against the thing trying to keep me here. I pushed back. And something cracked. The room shuddered. The shadows tore apart. And I was falling. I hit the floor of my bedroom hard. Gasping. Drenched in sweat. For a moment, I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then, I turned my head. The chair was gone. The small bedroom was empty again. The shadows were normal. The air was still. But I knew better. I felt it. The house was angry. It had tried to keep me, and I had escaped. For now. I staggered to my feet, my body aching, my vision swimming. I forced myself to move. To stumble down the stairs, to the front door. It didn't try to stop me this time. Because it knew something I didn't. It didn't have to trap me. Because I had already been marked. And no matter where I went, I belonged to it now. I left the house that night. Drove away. Never went back. But it didn't matter. Because the house followed. The whispers didn't stop. They just got quieter. The shadows didn't disappear. They just learned how to wait. And at 3:12 a.m. every night, no matter where I am, no matter how far I run, I hear it. The soft, rhythmic tapping. Waiting. For me to come home.